How's everybody doing today? And welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we'd like to take a look at some great theories of everything and do a deep dive. Excuse me. Do a deep dive into them to bring out what they can do in terms of shifting your paradigm, helping you with a holistic viewpoint, giving you options and inspiration. And today is our 402nd video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory, which was initiated by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. In 1959, Larson wrote up his two very brief, two fundamental postulates. And that was kind of how he boiled down how he felt that the universe was operating, which he determined based on a process of induction. And, basically going from the specific to the general. And then once he wrote up those postulates, he turned it around and moved from the general to the specific and said, through a process of if this, then that, or deduction, he said, well, if my fundamental postulates are correct, then what does that entail for the universe? What is in a universe where these two fundamental postulates are correct, what does that universe look like? And so he called this his theoretical universe. The universe that he designed in his head based on those fundamental postulates. I went over that process in about 15 videos that I did about a year ago called The Outline of the Deductive Development of the Reciprocal System. And you can find that if you go back about a year in the queue. And so in his books, he took those two fundamental postulates that he turned into a theoretical universe. And he took that theoretical universe and he compared it with the actual, so-called actual universe of the legacy scientists that they had arrived at through, experiments and measurements in their laboratories and observatories. So, they compiled these things in tables and charts, and they have entire bureaus dedicated to, looking at, say, the periodic table or all of the stars in the galaxy and, all of the data that is connected with those different entities. And Larson compared his results with their results. And it's very interesting to find out that Larson was able to recreate a lot of those results. Now, he talks about this here in this paper that we're going to go through today. But first, I just want to give you a quick once-over about those two fundamental postulates. The main postulate is the first one, and it reads, well, I'm not reading it, but it basically says, and he has revised it a few times over the years, so there's no exact script for it, but the universe is composed entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. Okay, so the universe is not made out of matter or energy, it's made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time, which sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Basically, motion is a fraction with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. And time or space as reciprocals have identical qualities, but they have them in reverse order. And they do not exist separately. They only exist together in motion. And motion is only in discrete units, as is space and time. And one of the qualities that they have is their coordinate nature. Space, as we observe, has 3 or more dimensions, XYZ coordinates, volume, and therefore time also has that same quality, 3 or more dimensions, in a stationary frame. Larson calls that coordinate time and coordinate space. And then also motion is not exactly what you normally think about motion being velocity, speed in a certain direction. But Larson is referring to a more generalized, non-localized kind of motion that he calls scalar motion. And scalar motion can be envisioned using a balloon with dots on it. If you blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other. But they're not moving in any specific direction. In fact, they're basically moving in all directions. Every dot is moving away from every other dot, and indeed, even the spaces between the dots are moving away from every other location on that surface of the balloon. But you also have to fill in the balloon. So you could also use something like raisin bread as a model. As you cook the bread, all of the raisins are moving away from each other, even on the interior of the bread. And this is a bona fide kind of motion that you can see in the physical world, but the scientists have relegated it to kind of an anomalous position, and they have not regarded it as being important. Larson is putting an emphasis on its importance and really putting it at the center of his theory. And then the second postulate is that the universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. This part of Larson's fundamental postulates is in dispute by some of his followers that prefer projective geometry because it is more inclusive. Projective geometry also includes Euclidean geometry. So it basically is saying that the Euclidean geometry is correct to an extent, but it doesn't cover certain situations that occur in this universe. Same too with the commutative mathematics and even with the absolute magnitudes. But anyway, we'll probably get into that a little bit more as we move along here. But we got to the point in this talk, which is called Around Unexpected Corners. It's a talk that Larson gave back in 1968. And he talks about his process of arriving at the reciprocal system, the 2 fundamental postulates, and then formulating his theoretical universe and comparing it with the legacy sciences tables and so on. And he's saying that these things are being, he's confirming that, his universe is comparing quite, to be very similar to the universe that the scientists have come up with. So we're going to just take over here. If even one feature of the map, he's comparing it to a map, but if even one feature of the map or theory is found to be in conflict with positively established facts derived from other sources, then the process is inaccurate and the map or theory as a whole is unreliable. But if no such discrepancy is found in the initial examination, then every additional check that is made without finding any discrepancy reduces the mathematical probability that any discrepancy exists anywhere in the map or theory. By making a sufficiently large number and variety of such checks, the probability of any error can be reduced to the point where it is negligible. Of course, I have not yet examined the application of my new theoretical system to more than a relatively small portion of the total world of physical phenomena, for reasons which should be obvious. But as I have just brought out, it is not necessary to check more than a representative sample of the features of an aerial photograph or a theory of the analogous type to be certain of its accuracy. And by this time, I have examined the application of the theory to the fundamentals of all of the major branches of physical science, and I have made enough checks of the kind that I have been talking about to reduce the possibility of any basic error in the system practically to the vanishing point. Of course, the possibility that there may be some flaw in one or more of the long chains of reasoning by which conclusions regarding some of the finer details were reached cannot be excluded. But aside from this, I am now able to assert that the new theoretical system is an accurate representation of the physical universe. If I had unlimited time, this is the point at which I would begin developing the specific consequences of the postulates, and thereby defining the theoretical universe in detail. But I cannot construct a universe for you in a few minutes. As I understand it, such a task has never been accomplished in less than 6 days. So the best that I can do is to give you an illustration of the kind of new and logical answers to long-standing problems that emerge from this development. Since I have already discussed the gravitational problem at considerable length, this will be an appropriate example. Inasmuch as the reciprocal of unity is unity, it follows from the reciprocal relation between space and time that one single unit of space is equivalent to one single unit of time. Consequently, when an additional unit of time has elapsed and some location A has progressed to A plus 1 in time, it has also progressed to A plus 1 in space. That is, there is a continuous progression of space similar to the progression of time that we ordinarily visualize. This means that the space-time system is not a static system of the kind that we can represent by fixed coordinates. It is a moving system analogous to an expanding balloon. If there are spots painted on the surface of such a balloon, the distance between them is continually increasing. But this does not indicate any actual motion of the spots. They are fixed and they cannot move. The increase in separation is a property of the system in which the spots are located, not of the spots themselves. If there are any objects on the surface of the balloon that do move, the true measure of their motion is not the observed increase in separation, but the amount by which this observed increase is more or less than that which would exist if these objects remained fixed to the surface in the same manner as the spots. Whatever problem there may be in grasping the true situation here is simply a matter of getting accustomed to the idea of a moving system of reference. We ordinarily think of such things as location and motion in terms of a three-dimensional reference system that is stationary in space. but it is obvious that such a reference system is not applicable to an expanding balloon. A spot on this balloon that in fact cannot move and must remain permanently in the same location does move with respect to a fixed coordinate system. The use of such a reference system, therefore, gives us a completely distorted view of this situation. It attributes motion in objects that cannot and do not move, and it gives us a totally unrealistic picture of the motion of any objects that do move. In order to get the true picture of what is actually happening on the surface of the balloon, we must utilize a moving reference system. The same is true of the physical situation. We live in a space-time system which is continually expanding because of the equivalence of the unit of space and the unit of time. The distant galaxies are analogous to the spots on the balloon, and the motion that carries them outward away from us and away from each other is not actually a motion of the galaxies at all. It is a property of the system. The space-time system in which these galaxies are located. If any particular galaxy does have a motion of its own, the true measure of that motion is not the motion that we observe, but the amount by which the observed motion differs from that which would exist by reason of the space-time progression alone. Here again, as in the case of the expanding balloon, we can get the true picture of what is happening only by the use of a moving reference system. Now for a still closer analogy, let us replace the expanding balloon by an expanding transparent solid, and let us assume that there are visible objects in the interior of this solid analogous to the spots on the surface of a balloon. All that has been said about the expanding balloon is now equally applicable to the expanding solid. Then let us further assume that we take a moving picture of the expanding solid under lighting conditions such that we see only the objects in the interior and not the transparent solid itself. What this picture will show is a group of objects that are continually moving outward away from each other. Here we have a model of the galactic recession. Now, let us run this film backwards. What we will now see is a group of objects that are continually moving inward toward each other. If we had no knowledge of how this situation originated, we might very well conclude that these objects were exerting forces of attraction upon each other. And with a little ingenuity, we could devise a mathematical expression that would enable us to calculate the magnitude of the force between any two of the objects, even though such forces do not actually exist. This analogy should give you a good understanding of the explanation of gravitation that is produced by the new system of theory, and it should enable you to understand why previous gravitational theories have gone wrong. All previous theories have assumed that gravitation is a force, or at least some kind of an effect, that is exerted by one mass upon another. And the stumbling block for these theories has been the fact that they could not account for the peculiar characteristics of the gravitational force, characteristics which are totally unlike those of any other force with which we come in contact. According to the new theory, each atom of matter has an inherent motion in the inward space-time direction, and the peculiar characteristics of the gravitational force are all due to the fact that there actually is no force at all. As in our model, each unit is pursuing its own independent course, but that course takes it inward toward all other such units. A question that is frequently asked is, what happens to existing physical theory if your conclusions are correct? Will a wholesale reconstruction of present theory be necessary? The answer to this question is definitely no. It is true that the new system does require some drastic changes in thinking in the far out regions, the realms of the very small, the very large, and the very fast. But it should be realized that the present state of theory in these areas is little short of chaotic. Indeed, along the outer boundary lines, present theory is essentially nothing more than speculation. I recently purchased a book that purports to summarize all that is now known about the subject that it covers, one of the subdivisions of science in which I am particularly interested at the moment. The preface to this book contains the following very significant admission. Quote, "It will be seen from the discussion in the later chapters that there are so many conflicting ideas concerning theory and interpretation that of the observations that at least 95% of them must indeed be wrong. But at present, no one knows which 95%. This is an extreme case, to be sure, but there are not many scientific areas in which as much as 95% of current thought is incorrect. But there are a great many areas in which there is a substantial percentage of error, a much greater percentage than is generally admitted. The existing situation, with particular reference to physics, is summed up in this statement taken from a recent issue of the magazine Science News. Quote, "The conditions are these: a large number of well-ordered facts with no present way of explaining them, and a large body of frustrated scientists." My finding is that this frustration is a direct result of the fact that modern theorists have abandoned the traditional methods and goals of science. Up to about a century ago, the task of science was almost universally regarded as a matter of discovery. As expressed by R.B. Lindsay in a recent article in one of the journals, quote, "Application of the term discovery implies that there is an external world out there, wholly independent of the observer and with built-in regularities and laws waiting to be uncovered and revealed. They have always been there and presumably always will be. Our task is by diligent search to find out what they are." End quote. This was the viewpoint of Galileo, of Newton, and the other great pioneers of science. The modern scientific establishment has repudiated this traditional viewpoint, and their present attitude is described by Lindsay in these words, quote, we are essentially viewing the purpose of physics as a scientific discipline, as invention rather than discovery. The term invention implies that the physicist uses not only his observations but his imaginative powers to construct points of view that identify with experience. End quote. Einstein was very emphatic on this score and insisted over and over again that, quote, "we can only grasp physical reality by speculative means," end quote. McVitie makes the same point in these words, quote, "the laws of nature are to be regarded as free creations of the human mind," end quote. The inevitable result of giving free rein to the imaginations in this manner has been that physical theory has lost touch with reality and has embarked on a course of pure speculation. Just in case you might feel that this picture that I am giving you is overdrawn, let me say that Werner Heisenberg, one of the principal architects of the modern speculative theory, is on record to exactly the same effects. He admits that modern science has lost the whole representation of reality, which has been the basis of the exact natural sciences up to the era of today's atomic physics. Okay, I think we're going to stop it right there, and I believe we will finish this article tomorrow. We're not too far from the end, but I don't think we'll finish it in time here. So we'll go over this tomorrow, and interesting stuff, and relative to a lot of stuff that's going on right now, where that a lot of science is just coming out of the imagination of people, not tethered to reality in any sense of the imagination. You can even look on the Senate floor to see people squirming when they're asked common sense questions about reality, and they can't admit to them because it goes against the narrative of the imaginative, wishful, hopeful thinkers of science that, for some reason they think that just because they hope something is true or they want something to be true, that they can make it true in science. And, that's not a good look for science. And, most people know that. And I think there's going to be a boomerang effect. And eventually we're going to get back to doing reality here instead of, just, taking the approach of, oh, well, if I say it enough, then it will become true. If we say this over and over again, we'll make it true. That works in some situations, in the spiritual world. You can, there's mantra and there's affirmations, but it's interesting to try to figure out where the line is, where you can use mantra and affirmations to kind of change your reality, and where there's a brick wall there, and it's kind of like your reality doesn't care, the truth doesn't care about your feelings. You can say it as many times as you want, it's still this, and you still have to deal with it. So I'll be thinking about that overnight. Maybe you will too. Maybe you can comment about it. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.